Willow Creek, Oregon, March 15, 1991. The morning mist hung heavy over Willow Creek's main street when Margaret Collins arrived to open her bakery across from Blooming Meadows, the town's only flower shop. What she discovered that Friday morning would haunt the small Oregon community for decades to come. At precisely 6:47 a.m., Margaret noticed something unusual. The flower shop's front door stood wide open, warm light spilling onto the sidewalk, but Michael Thompson was nowhere to be seen. This was highly irregular for a man known throughout Willow Creek for his meticulous routines and unwavering punctuality. So glad to have you here. Comment your city so I can bring cases from your region and also know where you're watching me from. Michael Thompson, 34, had owned Blooming Meadows for 8 years, transforming what was once a struggling nursery into the region's most respected botanical establishment. His expertise with rare plants had attracted customers from neighboring states, and his greenhouse was considered a local treasure. The shop specialized in exotic orchids and unusual flowering species that Michael somehow managed to cultivate in Oregon's challenging climate. Detective James Patterson of the Willow Creek Police Department received the missing person report at 9:15 a.m. when Jennifer Thompson, Michael's wife of 6 years, contacted authorities after her husband failed to return home the previous evening. Jennifer, a local elementary school teacher, explained that Michael had left their house Thursday evening around 7 p.m., claiming he needed to check on some temperature-sensitive seedlings in the shop's greenhouse. The initial investigation revealed disturbing details. Michael's 1987 Ford pickup truck was found parked in its usual spot behind the shop, keys still in the ignition. His wallet, containing $247 in cash and all identification, lay untouched on the counter inside. Most puzzling of all, every plant in the establishment appeared to have been recently watered and cared for, suggesting Michael had completed his evening routine before vanishing. Detective Patterson's examination of the premises uncovered several anomalies that elevated the case from a simple missing person report to something far more sinister. The shop's cash register remained untouched, containing the previous day's receipts totaling $183. However, a thorough search revealed that Michael's personal botanical notebook, which he carried everywhere, was missing. Jennifer Thompson provided crucial information about her husband's behavior in the weeks preceding his disappearance. She reported that Michael had been receiving unusual phone calls at odd hours, often taking them in private. These calls appeared to agitate him considerably, and he had become increasingly secretive about his work at the shop. Jennifer mentioned that Michael had been spending extraordinarily long hours in a greenhouse located at the rear of the property, often working well past midnight. The greenhouse in question proved to be a sophisticated operation far beyond what would be expected for a small-town flower shop. Temperature and humidity controls, specialized lighting systems, and hydroponic equipment created an environment capable of supporting virtually any plant species. Detective Patterson noted that the equipment appeared to be worth more than the entire shop's inventory, raising questions about how Michael had financed such an elaborate setup. Further investigation revealed that Michael had withdrawn $15,000 from the couple's joint savings account over the previous month, making several large cash withdrawals without explanation. Bank records showed these transactions occurred on days when Jennifer was at work, suggesting deliberate concealment. When questioned, Jennifer expressed complete ignorance about these financial activities. The community response to Michael's disappearance was immediate and intense. Volunteer search parties combed the surrounding forests and riverbanks for any trace of the missing botanist. The Willow Creek Volunteer Fire Department organized systematic searches of abandoned buildings and remote areas where Michael was known to collect wild plant specimens. Despite these efforts, no physical evidence of his whereabouts emerged. 3 days into the investigation, Detective Patterson made a discovery that would reshape the entire case. Hidden behind a false wall in the greenhouse's storage area, he found a collection of documentation that suggested Michael's botanical interests extended far beyond ordinary horticulture. Shipping receipts indicated regular deliveries from international suppliers, including several countries known for their restrictions on plant exports. Most significantly, Patterson discovered correspondence suggesting Michael was in contact with collectors and dealers in rare botanical specimens. These letters, written in careful formal language, discussed species that were either extinct or protected by international conservation treaties. The financial figures mentioned in these documents far exceeded anything that could be generated by a small-town flower shop's legitimate operations. The investigation took another troubling turn when authorities discovered that Michael had recently acquired permits for handling hazardous materials, specifically chemicals used in advanced plant propagation and genetic preservation techniques. These permits, dated just 2 months before his disappearance, indicated expertise and ambitions that seemed inconsistent with running a simple retail flower shop. Jennifer Thompson's shock at these revelations was evident to investigators. She maintained that her husband had never discussed international plant dealing or any activities beyond his passion for growing beautiful flowers for the local community. Her genuine surprise at each new discovery convinced Detective Patterson that Michael had been living a double life, carefully concealed from even his closest family member. As the first week of the investigation concluded, a pattern began to emerge that painted Michael Thompson as something far more complex than a small-town businessman. The sophisticated greenhouse equipment, the international correspondence, the unexplained financial transactions, and the mysterious phone calls all pointed toward involvement in activities that extended well beyond Willow Creek's borders. The case officially transitioned from a missing person investigation to a potential criminal matter when postal inspectors discovered that Michael had been receiving packages through a private mail service in nearby Salem, Oregon. These packages, according to shipping records, originated from locations across 4 different continents and were marked with codes that suggested deliberate obfuscation of their contents. But perhaps the most chilling discovery came on the 7th day of the investigation, when Detective Patterson found evidence that someone had been systematically removing files from Michael's greenhouse office. Fresh tool marks on a filing cabinet lock and missing sections from what appeared to be a carefully maintained plant inventory suggested that Michael's disappearance might not have been voluntary. As investigators prepared to expand their search beyond Willow Creek's borders, they could not have imagined that the answers they sought lay buried beneath their feet, waiting in the soil of the very greenhouse where Michael Thompson had spent his final hours. The seeds of truth had been planted, but it would take more than 3 decades for them to finally bear fruit. Willow Creek, Oregon, September 12, 2023, 32 years after Michael Thompson's mysterious disappearance, the weathered sign for blooming meadows hung askew on its rusted posts, a testament to time's relentless passage. The property had changed hands multiple times, each owner eventually abandoning the site after failing to make the business profitable. Local residents whispered that the place was cursed, though none could articulate exactly why the flower shop seemed to resist all attempts at revival. Dr. Sarah Williams arrived at the abandoned property on a crisp September morning, contracted by the current owners to conduct a comprehensive botanical survey before the planned demolition. As a specialist in extinct and endangered plant species from Portland State University, Sarah had been tasked with identifying any rare specimens that might require preservation or relocation before construction began on a new shopping complex. The property bore little resemblance to the thriving flower shop that had once been Michael Thompson's pride. Weeds had overrun the carefully maintained gardens, and the greenhouse structure had partially collapsed under years of neglect. Yet something about the site immediately captured Sarah's attention. Despite decades of abandonment, certain areas of the property showed signs of unusual botanical activity. Sarah's initial survey revealed plant species that had no business growing in Oregon's climate. Hardy subtropical specimens that should have died within the first winter had somehow established themselves and thrived. More intriguingly, several plant varieties appeared to be hybrids of known species, suggesting deliberate crossbreeding by someone with advanced botanical knowledge. Her investigation of the main greenhouse structure yielded the first significant clue about the property's mysterious past. Beneath years of accumulated debris and fallen roof panels, Sarah discovered sophisticated irrigation systems and climate control equipment that was decades ahead of its time. The level of technological advancement suggested an operation with access to resources far beyond what a small-town flower shop would typically possess. While documenting the greenhouse's layout, Sarah noticed an irregularity in the floor plan. A section of the concrete foundation appeared newer than the surrounding structure, despite showing significant age and weathering. Ground-penetrating radar equipment, borrowed from the university's archaeology department, revealed the presence of a substantial underground chamber directly beneath this area. The discovery of the hidden basement required careful excavation to avoid damaging any potential evidence. Working with a team of graduate students and local contractors, Sarah began the delicate process of accessing the underground facility. What they uncovered challenged everything they thought they knew about Michael Thompson's disappearance. The underground chamber was a botanist's dream laboratory, complete with growth chambers, seed storage facilities, and propagation equipment that remained remarkably well preserved despite 3 decades of abandonment. Temperature-controlled storage units still contained hundreds of seed samples, each carefully labeled with scientific nomenclature and cultivation notes written in Michael's distinctive handwriting. More disturbing was the discovery of a comprehensive journal documenting years of experimental plant breeding. Michael's notes revealed an obsession with creating hybrid species that could survive in extreme conditions, often combining characteristics from plants that existed on different continents. The scientific ambition displayed in these records suggested a level of expertise that far exceeded what anyone in Willow Creek had imagined Michael possessed. The journal entries became increasingly cryptic as they progressed chronologically toward March 1991. References to mysterious contacts, coded shipments, and financial pressures painted a picture of a man trapped in circumstances beyond his control. Most troubling were the final entries, which described growing concerns about the safety of his experimental work and references to unnamed individuals who were pressuring him to accelerate his research. Among the preserved specimens, Sarah made a discovery that would prove crucial to understanding Michael's fate. A collection of seeds labeled with scientific names that corresponded to no known plant species suggested that Michael had been creating entirely new organisms through genetic manipulation techniques that were highly experimental for the early 1990s. The implications of such work, conducted in secret and without oversight, raised serious questions about both scientific ethics and personal safety. The underground laboratory contained evidence of international correspondence dating back to 1987. Letters and shipping documents revealed a network of plant collectors and dealers operating across multiple continents. The financial figures mentioned in these documents indicated transactions worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, amounts that seemed impossible for a small-town florist to generate through legitimate means. Sarah's analysis of the seed collection revealed something even more disturbing. Several specimens showed evidence of genetic modification techniques that were not only experimental, but potentially dangerous. Cross-referencing Michael's notes with modern botanical databases, she discovered that some of the hybrid plants he had created were capable of producing toxic compounds that had no known antidotes. The investigation took a darker turn when Sarah found references to a figure known only as the gardener in Michael's correspondence. This individual appeared to be the central coordinator of the international plant trafficking network, providing funding and direction for experimental breeding programs conducted by botanists in remote locations around the world. Michael's role in this network seemed to have evolved from willing participant to reluctant participant as the demands became increasingly extreme. Financial records hidden in waterproof containers revealed the true scope of Michael's involvement in illegal plant trading. Bank routing numbers, cryptocurrency wallet addresses, and offshore account information painted a picture of a sophisticated money laundering operation that used rare plant sales to disguise the movement of substantial funds across international borders. Perhaps most chilling was Sarah's discovery of correspondence dated just days before Michael's disappearance. These letters indicated that Michael had threatened to expose the entire operation to federal authorities, specifically mentioning his intention to contact the Fish and Wildlife Service about illegal trafficking in endangered species. The responses to these threats, while coded in botanical terminology, carried unmistakable undertones of menace. The underground laboratory also contained photographic evidence of Michael's work, including time-lapse documentation of plant growth and development that revealed the true extent of his genetic manipulation experiments. Some of these photographs showed plant specimens that appeared to challenge fundamental assumptions about plant biology, suggesting that Michael had achieved breakthroughs that would have revolutionized botanical science if they had been conducted through legitimate channels. As Sarah compiled her findings, a pattern emerged that transformed Michael Thompson from missing person to key witness in what appeared to be an international criminal conspiracy. The sophistication of the operation, the amounts of money involved, and the potential dangers of unregulated genetic experimentation suggested that Michael's disappearance was not a random event, but a calculated response to his threat to expose the truth. The most significant discovery came in the final hours of the excavation. Hidden beneath the laboratory's main workbench, Sarah found a sealed container containing what appeared to be Michael's final research notes. These documents, dated March 14, 1991, revealed his growing fear that his involvement in the plant trafficking network had put both himself and his wife in danger. The final entry, written in an increasingly frantic hand, contained a list of names and locations that would prove crucial to understanding the true scope of the conspiracy that had consumed Michael Thompson's life. As Sarah carefully preserved these documents for examination by federal investigators, she could not have imagined that Michael Thompson's seeds of scientific ambition had grown into a network of criminal activity that continued to operate 3 decades after his disappearance. The roots of this conspiracy ran deep, and the harvest of truth was only beginning to emerge from the soil where it had been buried for so long. Portland, Oregon, September 18, 2023. The fluorescent lights of the FBI field office cast harsh shadows across the conference table where Dr. Sarah Williams found herself 6 days after her groundbreaking discovery. Special Agent William Crawford of the Bureau's Environmental Crime Unit had been assigned to evaluate the evidence she had uncovered in Michael Thompson's underground laboratory. What began as a routine consultation would soon evolve into the most significant botanical crime investigation in federal law enforcement history. Agent Crawford's initial skepticism dissolved rapidly as Sarah presented the meticulously documented evidence from the hidden facility. The international correspondence, financial records, and experimental data painted a picture of criminal activity that extended far beyond a single missing person case. The list of names and locations found in Michael's final notes provided a roadmap to what appeared to be a sophisticated international network that had operated undetected for decades. The Bureau's analysis of the correspondence revealed coded communications with individuals across 17 different countries, suggesting a level of organization that rivaled major drug trafficking operations. More disturbing was the discovery that several of the names on Michael's list corresponded to botanists and agricultural researchers who had themselves disappeared under mysterious circumstances over the past 3 decades, creating a pattern that had previously gone unnoticed by law enforcement. Federal investigators quickly identified the central figure in this network through cross-referencing Michael's correspondence with existing criminal databases. Dr. David Morgan, a brilliant botanist who had been expelled from the academic community in 1985 for conducting unauthorized genetic experiments, matched the profile of the mysterious gardener referenced throughout Michael's documentation. Morgan's expertise in plant genetics and his documented history of ethical violations made him the prime suspect in coordinating the illegal research network. The investigation into Morgan's background revealed a disturbing pattern of scientific obsession that had progressively escalated into criminal behavior. Academic records showed that Morgan had been researching methods to create weaponized plant species capable of producing toxins that could bypass conventional detection methods. His expulsion from the university system had apparently driven him underground, where he continued his research through a network of recruited botanists operating in remote locations. Sarah's analysis of the genetic modification techniques documented in Michael's laboratory provided crucial insights into the scope of Morgan's scientific ambitions. The hybrid plants created in the Willow Creek facility demonstrated capabilities that went far beyond simple botanical experimentation. Several specimens showed evidence of deliberate engineering to produce compounds that could be extracted and concentrated into substances with applications ranging from pharmaceutical development to biological warfare. The financial investigation revealed the true scale of the operation's profitability. Bank records obtained through federal subpoenas showed that the plant trafficking network had generated over $12 million in revenue during the 5 years preceding Michael's disappearance. The money flowed through a complex series of shell companies and offshore accounts, with transactions structured to avoid detection by traditional financial monitoring systems. Most chilling was the discovery that the network had been actively recruiting botanists with specific expertise in genetic modification and toxicology. University employment records showed that at least 8 researchers with relevant qualifications had left their positions under unusual circumstances during the late 1980s and early 1990s, with several subsequently disappearing entirely from academic and professional circles. The Bureau's Behavioral Analysis Unit developed a profile of David Morgan that revealed a methodical predator who targeted vulnerable scientists facing career difficulties or financial pressures. Morgan's recruitment methods involved offering substantial financial compensation for research that appeared legitimate on the surface, but gradually evolved into increasingly dangerous experimentation. The psychological manipulation tactics he employed were designed to trap participants in situations where exposure of the illegal activities would destroy their own careers and reputations. Federal agents examining Michael's correspondence discovered evidence that Morgan had been pressuring him to accelerate the development of particularly dangerous hybrid species in the months before his disappearance. References to Project Nightshade appeared frequently in the final communications, suggesting a specific research goal that required Michael's unique expertise in temperature-resistant plant cultivation. The investigation took a dramatic turn when Sarah's analysis of the preserved seed samples revealed that several specimens contained genetic modifications that could only have been achieved using classified biotechnology research. Cross-referencing with Department of Defense databases indicated that someone within the network had access to military-grade genetic engineering equipment, suggesting potential connections to government research facilities or defense contractors. Agent Crawford's team uncovered evidence that the plant trafficking network had been selling modified organisms to clients in countries with known biological weapons programs. Shipping records and correspondence fragments indicated transactions with entities and nations that had repeatedly violated international agreements on biological warfare research. The implications suggested that Michael's botanical experiments were being used for purposes far more sinister than simple profit generation. The breakthrough in understanding Morgan's ultimate objectives came through Sarah's discovery of research notes describing plans to create self-propagating toxic plants that could be introduced into agricultural systems. The documents outlined a theoretical framework for biological warfare that could devastate entire regions through contamination of food supplies. The scientific sophistication required for such an operation indicated years of preparation and access to resources far beyond what any individual could possess. Federal surveillance of locations mentioned in Michael's correspondence led to the discovery of 3 additional underground laboratories operating in remote areas of Washington, California, and Nevada. Each facility showed evidence of recent activity, suggesting that the network Morgan had established was not only still operational, but had expanded significantly since Michael's disappearance. The laboratories contained equipment worth millions of dollars and research materials, indicating ongoing development of increasingly dangerous biological agents. The investigation revealed that Morgan had been using legitimate botanical research institutions as cover for his illegal activities. Several university greenhouses and agricultural research centers showed evidence of after-hours access and unauthorized experiments conducted during periods when official staff were not present. The sophisticated nature of this infiltration indicated long-term planning and significant financial resources dedicated to maintaining operational security. Perhaps most disturbing was the discovery that the network had been systematically eliminating evidence of its activities through targeted destruction of research facilities and elimination of participants who posed security risks. Fire department records showed an unusual pattern of greenhouse and laboratory fires over the past 2 decades, with several incidents resulting in the deaths of botanical researchers who had previously been associated with the network. As federal investigators compiled evidence of the network's activities, a timeline emerged showing escalating violence against participants who attempted to withdraw from the operation. Michael Thompson's final correspondence indicated that he had become aware of the lethal consequences faced by those who threatened to expose the conspiracy, explaining his increasingly desperate tone in the weeks before his disappearance. The scope of the investigation expanded dramatically when Sarah's analysis revealed that some of the modified plant species created in Michael's laboratory had already been released into natural ecosystems. Environmental sampling in areas surrounding Willow Creek detected the presence of hybrid organisms that were slowly establishing themselves in the wild, creating the potential for uncontrolled spread of genetically modified species with unknown long-term consequences. Agent Crawford's team faced the realization that they were not simply investigating a historical crime, but an ongoing threat to environmental and national security. The evidence suggested that David Morgan's network had evolved into a sophisticated criminal organization capable of biological terrorism on a scale that challenged conventional law enforcement capabilities. The seeds of destruction planted decades earlier were beginning to germinate, and the harvest promised to be far more deadly than anyone could have imagined. British Columbia, Canada, October 3, 2023. The remote coordinates extracted from Michael Thompson's encrypted research notes led federal investigators to a seemingly pristine wilderness preserve nestled in the Canadian Rockies, 200 miles north of the U.S. border. What appeared to be an untouched natural sanctuary would soon reveal itself as the epicenter of the most sophisticated biological crime operation in modern history. Dr. Sarah Williams accompanied the joint FBI Royal Canadian Mounted Police Task Force as they approached the coordinates that had remained hidden in Michael's documentation for over 3 decades. Satellite imagery showed a modest research station that appeared consistent with legitimate environmental monitoring activities. But ground-penetrating radar revealed an extensive underground complex that defied explanation for such a remote location. The facility's surface structures bore the markings of the Canadian Environmental Research Institute, a legitimate organization that had operated the station since 1988. However, federal investigators quickly discovered that the institute's funding came primarily from shell corporations, with ties to the same offshore accounts identified in Michael's financial records. The research station was effectively a front operation that had operated under government oversight while conducting illegal activities in its hidden underground levels. Agent William Crawford's investigation team faced immediate challenges when they discovered that the facility's director, Dr. Richard Stevens, possessed credentials and research publications that established him as a respected member of the Canadian scientific community. Stevens had spent decades building a reputation as a conservation biologist, making him an unlikely candidate for involvement in criminal activities. However, biometric analysis and behavioral assessment suggested that Stevens might be operating under an assumed identity. The breakthrough came when Sarah analyzed botanical specimens collected from the research station's greenhouse facilities. Several plant varieties matched genetic markers from the hybrid species created in Michael Thompson's underground laboratory, indicating direct connections between the two operations. More significantly, the sophistication of the genetic modifications found in the Canadian facility far exceeded anything discovered in Oregon, suggesting decades of continued development and refinement. Federal agents conducting surveillance of the facility documented unusual activity patterns that contradicted the station's stated research mission. Delivery trucks arrived at irregular intervals carrying equipment and materials inconsistent with environmental monitoring, while personnel movements suggested a much larger operational staff than official records indicated. Most concerning was the presence of individuals with known expertise in biological weapons development among the station's unofficial workforce. The investigation revealed that the Canadian facility served as the primary research and development center for David Morgan's botanical weapons program. Underground laboratories contained equipment capable of industrial-scale production of genetically modified organisms, while climate-controlled storage areas housed seed banks containing thousands of hybrid species developed over 30 years of continuous research. The facility's isolation and legitimate government connections provided perfect cover for operations that would have attracted immediate attention in more populated areas. Sarah's analysis of the facility's research documentation revealed the true scope of Morgan's scientific ambitions. Project Nightshade, the program that had pressured Michael Thompson to accelerate his research, was revealed to be a comprehensive biological warfare initiative designed to create weaponized plants capable of targeting specific genetic markers in human populations. The scientific sophistication required for such research indicated access to classified biotechnology that should have been restricted to government defense contractors. The investigation uncovered evidence that Morgan had been recruiting researchers from government biological defense programs through a combination of financial incentives and professional manipulation. Several scientists with security clearances had provided access to classified research and equipment, enabling the development of biological weapons that exceeded the capabilities of most national defense programs. The implications suggested a level of infiltration into government research facilities that posed significant national security risks. Federal agents discovered that the facility had been conducting field tests of weaponized plant species in remote areas across North America. Environmental samples collected from test sites showed evidence of genetic modifications designed to survive in specific climate conditions while producing toxins targeted at particular ethnic groups. The research represented a level of biological warfare development that violated numerous international treaties and posed unprecedented threats to global security. The timeline of the facility's operations revealed that David Morgan had been using the identity of Dr. Richard Stevens for over 25 years, successfully maintaining his cover while expanding the scope of his criminal activities. Immigration and identity verification systems had failed to detect the substitution, allowing Morgan to operate with virtual impunity while developing increasingly dangerous biological weapons under the protection of legitimate government oversight. The investigation team faced a critical decision when they discovered that the facility was preparing to initiate a large-scale deployment of weaponized plant species. Communications intercepted from the facility indicated plans to introduce genetically modified organisms into agricultural systems across multiple countries, with the potential to cause widespread crop failures and famine. The timeline for deployment suggested that intervention would need to occur within days to prevent catastrophic consequences. Sarah's analysis of the deployment plans revealed that Morgan had developed self-propagating plant species designed to spread rapidly through natural ecosystems while producing toxins that would contaminate food and water supplies. The biological agents were engineered to remain dormant for months after initial introduction, making detection and containment virtually impossible once deployment began. The sophistication of the weapon system indicated decades of preparation and testing in controlled environments. The investigation uncovered evidence that Morgan had been providing biological weapons technology to terrorist organizations and hostile foreign governments. Financial records showed payments from entities linked to biological warfare programs in countries that posed significant threats to international security. The revenue generated from these transactions had funded continued research and development of increasingly sophisticated weapon systems. Federal agents monitoring communications from the facility intercepted discussions of a final phase operation that would target major agricultural regions in North America and Europe simultaneously. The coordinated attack was designed to cause maximum disruption to global food supplies while maintaining plausible deniability through the use of organisms that appeared to be naturally occurring plant diseases. The timing of the operation suggested it was intended to coincide with existing geopolitical tensions to maximize destabilization effects. The scope of the threat became clear when Sarah discovered that Morgan had developed multiple deployment methods for his biological weapons. In addition to agricultural infiltration, the research documented plans for atmospheric dispersal systems that could distribute spores across vast geographical areas. The weapons could be deployed through conventional aircraft, shipping containers, or even individual operatives carrying modified plant seeds. As federal investigators prepared to intervene at the Canadian facility, they realized they faced an opponent who had spent decades perfecting both his biological weapons and his operational security. Morgan's network included cells operating across multiple continents, with sufficient resources and expertise to continue operations even if the primary facility was compromised. The investigation had revealed not just a criminal conspiracy, but a biological warfare program that threatened global security. The evidence compiled from Michael Thompson's hidden laboratory had exposed a threat that had been growing undetected for over 30 years. The seeds of scientific curiosity that had initially motivated Michael's research had been corrupted into instruments of mass destruction, and the harvest of Morgan's ambitions promised consequences that could reshape the balance of global power. The time for careful investigation had passed. The moment for decisive action had arrived, and failure would mean consequences too terrible to contemplate. British Columbia, Canada, October 7, 2023. The pre-dawn darkness of the Canadian wilderness was shattered by the coordinated movement of tactical teams as Operation Green Sweep commenced at precisely 4:17 a.m. Special Agent William Crawford led the multinational task force that had spent 4 days planning the simultaneous raids on 17 locations across 3 countries, all connected to David Morgan's biological weapons network. The operation represented the largest coordinated response to a biothreat in law enforcement history. Dr. Sarah Williams monitored the primary assault from a mobile command center positioned 2 miles from the Canadian facility. Her expertise in botanical warfare agents made her presence essential for identifying and securing the dangerous biological materials that intelligence suggested were being prepared for imminent deployment. The stakes could not have been higher, as intercepted communications indicated that Morgan's network was less than 72 hours away from initiating their global attack. The assault on the Canadian Environmental Research Institute revealed the true scope of Morgan's operation. Beneath the innocuous surface buildings, tactical teams discovered a sprawling underground complex that extended nearly half a mile in multiple directions. The facility contained production capabilities that could generate biological weapons on an industrial scale, with storage areas housing enough weaponized plant material to contaminate agricultural systems across entire continents. Resistance from the facility's personnel was minimal but strategically planned. Security forces had positioned themselves to protect critical areas while implementing systematic destruction of evidence and research materials. The facility's computer systems were programmed with automatic deletion protocols that activated upon unauthorized entry, requiring federal cybercrime specialists to work frantically to preserve crucial intelligence about the network's global operations. The most significant discovery came when assault teams breached the facility's central laboratory complex. Sarah's analysis of the materials found in this area revealed that Morgan had successfully created biological weapons that exceeded theoretical projections from government defense research. The weaponized plants were capable of surviving in virtually any climate while producing toxins that could target specific genetic markers with precision that bordered on the impossible. Agent Crawford's team faced immediate challenges when they discovered that Dr. Richard Stevens, the facility's director, was not present during the raid. Intelligence suggested that Stevens, who had been confirmed as David Morgan, operating under an assumed identity, had departed the facility 3 days earlier with a team of core researchers and a significant quantity of biological weapons material. The implications were clear. The primary target had anticipated the raid and implemented contingency plans that allowed the operation's leadership to escape. The investigation of Morgan's personal quarters within the facility provided disturbing insights into the mind of a scientist who had transformed from legitimate researcher into international terrorist. Personal documents and research notes revealed a progressive radicalization driven by a combination of scientific obsession and ideological extremism. Morgan's writings described a vision of global transformation through biological warfare, with himself positioned as the architect of a new world order. Sarah's examination of the facility's seed banks revealed the true extent of Morgan's 30-year research program. Thousands of genetically modified plant species had been developed, cataloged, and stored under precise environmental conditions. Each species was designed for specific deployment scenarios, with modifications tailored to particular geographical regions, climate conditions, and target populations. The sophistication of the biological arsenal suggested capabilities that rivaled those of major national defense programs. The raid teams discovered evidence that Morgan's network had been conducting field tests of biological weapons for over a decade. Environmental samples collected from test sites across North America showed evidence of controlled releases designed to evaluate the effectiveness of weaponized plant species under real-world conditions. Most disturbing was the discovery that several test deployments had been conducted in populated areas with effects that had been misattributed to natural disease outbreaks. Federal agents analyzing the facility's communication systems uncovered the operational structure of Morgan's global network. Cell-based organization and encrypted communication protocols had allowed the conspiracy to operate across multiple countries while maintaining operational security that had prevented detection by international intelligence agencies. The network included operatives embedded in government research facilities, agricultural organizations, and environmental monitoring agencies. The scope of the conspiracy became fully apparent when investigators discovered that Morgan had been manipulating legitimate environmental research to conceal his biological weapons development. Scientific publications and research grants had provided cover for activities that would have attracted immediate attention if conducted through traditional military or intelligence channels. The deception had been so sophisticated that even peer review processes had failed to detect the dual-use nature of the research. Agent Crawford's team made a breakthrough when they discovered Morgan's deployment timeline in the facility's command center. The biological weapons attack was scheduled to begin in less than 48 hours, with coordinated releases planned for agricultural regions in 12 countries. The attack would target grain production areas during harvest season, maximizing the potential for global food supply disruption. The timing suggested that Morgan had been planning this operation for years, waiting for optimal conditions to ensure maximum impact. The investigation revealed that Morgan had developed multiple contingency plans to ensure his biological weapons program would survive, even if primary facilities were compromised. Secondary research sites and hidden storage locations contained backup supplies of weaponized materials, while sleeper cells were positioned to continue operations independently. The network's resilience suggested that stopping the immediate threat would require coordinated action across multiple continents. Sarah's analysis of intercepted communications revealed that Morgan had been providing biological weapons technology to hostile foreign governments as part of a broader destabilization strategy. The relationships with these entities suggested that the planned agricultural attack was intended to create economic and political chaos that would benefit nations opposed to Western democratic institutions. The conspiracy represented not just criminal activity, but a sophisticated form of asymmetric warfare. The most alarming discovery came when federal agents found evidence that Morgan's network had infiltrated agricultural research institutions and seed companies. Contaminated plant materials had been introduced into legitimate distribution channels, creating the potential for widespread contamination of agricultural systems through normal commercial activities. The scope of this infiltration suggested that the biological weapons attack could occur through multiple vectors simultaneously. As the first phase of Operation Greensweep concluded, law enforcement agencies faced the sobering reality that they had prevented an imminent attack but had not captured the primary perpetrators. David Morgan and his core team remained at large with sufficient biological weapons material to continue their operations. Intelligence suggested that backup plans were already being implemented, with new deployment schedules that would accelerate the timeline for biological weapons attacks. The evidence collected from the Canadian facility painted a picture of a criminal conspiracy that had evolved far beyond the disappearance of a small-town florist 32 years earlier. Michael Thompson's attempt to expose an illegal plant trafficking operation had uncovered a biological weapons program that threatened global security. The seeds of scientific curiosity that had motivated Michael's initial research had grown into instruments of mass destruction that could reshape the balance of international power. Federal investigators realized that the discovery of Michael Thompson's hidden laboratory had provided the crucial breakthrough needed to expose Morgan's network. But the investigation had also revealed the true scope of the threat they faced. The biological weapons that had taken 3 decades to develop were now in the hands of international terrorists who possessed both the capability and the determination to deploy them against civilian populations. The race to prevent global catastrophe had only just begun, and time was running out faster than anyone had imagined. International Waters, North Pacific, October 15, 2023. The massive cargo vessel Northern Star cut through the rough Pacific waters under the cover of storm clouds, its holds containing what intelligence agencies had confirmed to be the largest biological weapons shipment in recorded history. 8 days after the raids on David Morgan's network, international law enforcement had finally located the missing terrorist leader aboard a ship registered in Panama but operating under the control of a hostile foreign government. Dr. Sarah Williams watched from the bridge of the USS Defender as the Joint Coast Guard and Navy interception operation unfolded. The maritime pursuit had begun when satellite surveillance detected unusual movement patterns from vessels departing Canadian ports immediately following Operation Green Sweep. Advanced tracking technology and international cooperation had led investigators to the Northern Star, which had been attempting to reach territorial waters where Morgan's biological weapons could be transferred to operatives for global deployment. The boarding operation revealed the true scope of Morgan's final gambit. The ship's cargo holds contained industrial-scale biological weapons production equipment, along with enough weaponized plant material to contaminate agricultural systems across multiple continents. More disturbing was the discovery that Morgan had been preparing to establish floating laboratories that could operate beyond the jurisdiction of any single nation, creating a mobile biological weapons program that would be virtually impossible to detect or stop. Special Agent William Crawford led the tactical team that finally apprehended David Morgan in the ship's command center. The 68-year-old scientist showed no resistance when confronted, displaying the calm demeanor of someone who believed his work would continue regardless of his personal fate. Morgan's capture ended a 32-year reign of terror that had begun with the manipulation of a small-town florist and evolved into a global biological weapons conspiracy. The interrogation of Morgan and his associates revealed the full timeline of Michael Thompson's involvement in the network. Morgan confirmed that Michael had been recruited in 1987 through a combination of financial incentives and professional manipulation. Initially, Michael had believed he was participating in legitimate research to develop drought-resistant plants for agricultural applications in developing countries. The gradual introduction of increasingly dangerous modifications had trapped Michael in a situation where exposure would have destroyed his reputation and livelihood. Federal investigators learned that Michael's decision to threaten exposure of the network had been motivated by his discovery that the hybrid plants he was creating were being weaponized for biological warfare applications. Morgan's correspondence revealed that Michael had demanded an immediate halt to the weapons research and had threatened to contact federal authorities if his demands were not met. The response had been swift and lethal, with Morgan personally overseeing the elimination of the perceived threat to his operation. The location of Michael Thompson's remains was finally revealed through Morgan's confession. The small-town florist had been killed in his own greenhouse using toxins extracted from the very plants he had helped to create. Morgan's description of the events was delivered with clinical detachment, treating Michael's death as a necessary operational decision, rather than the murder of an innocent man who had simply wanted to withdraw from criminal activity. Morgan's network had disposed of Michael's body using methods designed to eliminate all physical evidence. The remains had been processed using biological agents that accelerated decomposition, then distributed across multiple remote locations to prevent discovery. The sophisticated disposal technique explained why extensive searches in 1991 had failed to locate any trace of Michael's remains, as the evidence had been systematically destroyed using cutting-edge biotechnology. The investigation into Morgan's financial network revealed the true scale of the biological weapons conspiracy. Over 35 years of operation, the network had generated more than $200 million in revenue through sales of weaponized biological materials to terrorist organizations and hostile governments. The money had funded research and development activities that exceeded the capabilities of most national defense programs, while maintaining operational security that had prevented detection by international intelligence agencies. Sarah's analysis of the seized biological weapons revealed scientific achievements that challenged fundamental assumptions about the potential for biological warfare. Morgan's team had successfully created self-replicating organisms capable of surviving in virtually any environment while producing toxins that could target specific genetic markers with unprecedented precision. The weapons represented a level of biological engineering that exceeded theoretical projections from government research programs by decades. The international prosecution of Morgan and his associates required unprecedented cooperation between law enforcement agencies across 17 countries. The complexity of the charges, which included terrorism, biological weapons development, and crimes against humanity, necessitated the creation of special international tribunals designed to handle cases involving threats to global security. Morgan's trial became a landmark case that established new precedents for prosecuting biological warfare crimes. The evidence presented during Morgan's trial revealed the psychological profile of a scientist whose legitimate research interests had been corrupted by ideological extremism and unlimited access to resources. Expert testimony described a progressive radicalization process that had transformed a respected botanist into an international terrorist capable of developing weapons that could kill millions of people. The case provided crucial insights into the process by which scientific expertise could be weaponized against civilian populations. Morgan's conviction on multiple charges of terrorism, biological weapons development, and murder resulted in a life sentence without possibility of parole. His associates received sentences ranging from 25 years to life, with several cooperating witnesses receiving reduced sentences in exchange for testimony that exposed additional aspects of the conspiracy. The prosecutions effectively dismantled the network that had operated undetected for over 3 decades. The environmental cleanup required to address the contamination caused by Morgan's network represented one of the largest biological remediation efforts in history. Specialized teams worked to identify and neutralize weaponized plant species that had been released during field testing operations, while agricultural monitoring systems were enhanced to detect potential future biological weapons attacks. The costs of the cleanup exceeded $500 million and required ongoing monitoring that would continue for decades. The case established new international protocols for monitoring biological research and preventing the development of biological weapons by non-state actors. Enhanced screening procedures for researchers working with dangerous biological materials, improved oversight of international scientific collaboration, and strengthened financial monitoring systems were implemented to prevent similar conspiracies from developing in the future. Dr. Sarah Williams received recognition from multiple government agencies for her crucial role in exposing Morgan's network. Her analysis of the botanical evidence found in Michael Thompson's hidden laboratory had provided the breakthrough that enabled law enforcement to prevent a biological weapons attack that could have killed millions of people. The case established her as one of the world's leading experts in biological weapons identification and environmental forensics. Jennifer Thompson, Michael's widow, finally received closure after 32 years of uncertainty about her husband's fate. The revelation that Michael had been killed while attempting to prevent a biological weapons attack transformed him from missing person to heroic figure who had sacrificed his life to protect global security. A memorial service attended by federal officials and international law enforcement representatives honored Michael's courage in exposing the conspiracy that had cost him his life. The investigation revealed that Michael Thompson's hidden laboratory had contained the seeds of justice that would eventually expose one of the most dangerous criminal conspiracies in modern history. His meticulous documentation and careful preservation of evidence had provided federal investigators with the tools needed to unravel a biological weapons network that threatened global security. The small-town florist's dedication to scientific integrity had ultimately saved countless lives by enabling the prevention of a catastrophic biological weapons attack. The case of Michael Thompson's disappearance demonstrated that even the most sophisticated criminal conspiracies could be exposed through careful investigation and scientific analysis. The seeds of truth that had been buried for over 3 decades had finally grown into a harvest of justice, ensuring that those responsible for developing biological weapons would face the consequences of their crimes. The legacy of a missing florist had become a testament to the power of scientific integrity and the pursuit of justice, no matter how long it might take to achieve.